Continuing on with the Fallen Mediocre Club series. This week, we are looking at none other than the... Oops, let me just double click that.
Pause for effect.
The Adelaide Rams.
Wow. Hello, Microsoft Paint. I love your logo made by a Year 7 kid.
Yep, it was, again, 90s sort of artwork. Do you still see the Rams logo, Dubs?
I can see the Rams logo. I can't say I'm particularly impressed. I mean, I know our logo back then has aged as well, but I'd like to think...
I liked our logo.
I liked our logo back then. That's the point. It still looked good for its time. It just looks dated. This looks terrible. I don't mean to be such a dick about it, but that is an awful logo. That's a clip art logo.
I don't mind it. I don't think it's that bad, but anyway.
I just wonder what it is. It doesn't have like a shield on it. It's just a yellow and blue ram with a big
that whole sort of 90s, Super League, it was all about like trying to look at American sports and try to copy a lot what's going on in America.
That's not a great thing in itself, but anyway.
Yeah, and I feel that the logo, this Rams logo, sort of reflects that. All right, anyway, Dub. So I'll begin the Adelaide Rams story in the early 90s. First of all, I just want to say I've done a lot of research. I've had to dig into some archives. I feel like a professional rugby league historian right now. All right, so as early as 1991, they'd taken first grade games to Adelaide. So 1991, St George played Balmain in obviously a competitive game. 30,000 fans packed at Adelaide Oval to watch that game, which was a lot better sort of attendances and there was a lot more success hosting games in Adelaide than there was at Perth and Melbourne at the same time. Anyway, so an Adelaide consortium under the control of the SARL, so the South Australian Rugby League, actually lodged an application in mid-94 to the ARL to join the expanded 95 premiership. So as we've talked about in other episodes, that's when, you had the Crushers, Cowboys, Warriors, and the Western Reds coming in. But obviously that bid was unsuccessful. So then on the 12th of November, 94, the Adelaide Advertiser reported that News Limited's 96 Super League competition would include a South Australian club. It was announced that the Sydney club would relocate to Adelaide and be named the Adelaide Aces. Now, the name the Adelaide Aces was used a lot in this whole Adelaide team. The reason being was there was a potential sponsorship of the Adelaide Casino if they were to sort of go with that name. But anyway, those plans obviously fizzled out because of what happened in '95 in terms of the ARL and Super League and the Super League war there. But the push for the Adelaide team gained serious momentum when the SARL signed with Super League in June '95. So Super League's preference was for a Melbourne team, but the Victorian Rugby League decided to remain loyal to the ARL, and also the Victorian government was very hesitant to provide any assistance or support. So Super League, they wanted a team in Melbourne, but because there was no support, they said, all right, well, the SARL's all for it, so let's give it to Adelaide. So on the 13th of December 1995, Super League announced that they would have a team from Adelaide, making it the 10th and final team to join the Super League. The name the Adelaide Aces was eventually changed to the Rams. This is a quote from John Rebo, who, as we know, was the first CEO of Melbourne Storm, also CEO of the Super League at the time. Quote, the Adelaide Rams name is readily identifiable with strength and hardness. The interim label of the Adelaide Aces was too soft and did not have the required identity and branding necessary for a Super League team. Now, I know, although, I kind of like the name Rams, it's definitely better than Aces, so I think they made a good call there.
Rams beats Aces, but I can think of plenty more terrifying animals than a ram.
Yeah. Anyway, apparently Rams, I haven't really researched this thoroughly, but I read this while I was obviously doing this Adelaide Rams piece, was one of the discarded potential nicknames for the Adelaide Crows. Obviously, they selected Crows, so which I thought was a little bit of interesting trivia. Anyway, they obviously then adopted the colours of South Australia. They played in those blue, red, and yellow. Although they didn't really have yellow on their jerseys, but it did feature on their logo. Kerry Walters was their sort of captain and marquee player, and Ron Reddy was their initial coach. Another interesting thing, they tried to sign George Gregan in 1996 when they were obviously setting up their team. So could you imagine George Gregan playing at the Adelaide Rams? I don't think he would have had this illustrious career as he did in Union. I think Gregan made the right call there, sticking with rugby union.
He did. He was just on the cusp of becoming one of the best halfbacks in the world.
Yeah.
and he was for a good 10 years after that. So probably a mutually beneficial decision there. It might have, well, maybe the Rams would have got something out of it, but it's not, code swapping doesn't always work out.
No, but yeah, he would have joined this team that was just mediocre, or anyway, he went on to win the World Cup with Australia in '99. But anyway, so let's talk about their first season. So like a lot of these teams with profile dubs that sort of popped up in the mid-90s, they attracted huge crowds. Nearly 28,000 people packed out Adelaide Oval for their first game. I believe it was against the Hunter Mariners, and they won that. Now, it was 27,435. This was the fourth highest attendance of the entire 1997 Super League season, only behind the grand final, Super League grand final, the opening game in Brisbane, and there was a round 6 game in Townsville that attracted 30,000. This is pretty good for a rugby league city. And for their first season, they had the average home attendance of 15,330, the fourth highest in Super League, and the fifth highest of all 22 teams in both ARL and Super League competitions, which was pretty good. So 97, they finished 9th out of 10th, although it was pretty close. I think there were only 2 or 3 games out of that, the top 5 final series, because I think it was pretty close, that Super League table in 97. 98, things went a bit pear-shaped. It really went wrong early on in 98. So, I'm trying to find the quote. Producing only 1 win out of the opening 7 games drove the club apart, eventually resulting in coach Rod Reddy being shown the door. Reddy was sacked in early May, and the club rejected a team for the game against Canberra. The coach had intended to drop at least 4 star players from the starting 13. I can't believe club committees and boards actually, I hope that doesn't happen anymore, that clubs committees can actually reject team lists submitted by the coach. I think they really should stay out of that.
Hope for an autonomous football department, but there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, 98 was pretty bad. They lost a lot of their first games early. Their average crowds dropped to 7,500, so like less than half what they were averaging in their first season. And to make things worse, the South Australian Cricket Association had ongoing problems with the SARL and the Rams' use of the stadium, of Adelaide Oval, that is. So they moved to the rectangular Hindmarsh Stadium, which, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't go for that at the start. I think at the time, Hindmarsh, though, wasn't a great stadium. Do you remember Hindmarsh in the mid to late 90s?
If you follow sport keenly, if you follow football keenly, that's the round ball in this country, as you and I do. You might remember the old Adelaide City side with Alex Tobin and the Vidmars back in the 90s, very strong, playing a couple of grand finals there. Think back to Mediocre at the Melbourne Knights. There was that grand final in 95, I think, played there. Look, great if you're an old-fashioned sports fan, you love rough as guts venues, high fences, people crammed in old terracing. You and I would probably love it, but I can see why it didn't really work as a boutique venue. It wasn't particularly polished at the time. It had the one stand and the rest of it was terracing and bays of pretty open seats. And even though it's not a 5-star covered venue at the moment, it was at least significantly improved around the time of the Olympics. So it has been better since the early 2000s.
Yeah, it's quite a nice little stadium for Adelaide standards, of course. now it is. Anyway, so
they've got the really nice Adelaide Oval now, in fairness to them. So we can't bag them too much. We can. We just, we'll expect them to fight back this time.
Anyway, so 98 was pretty dismal. They finished 17th out of 20. However, they went on a spending spree for the 99 season. They even had a season launch in November of 98 where they actually unveiled their jerseys for the 99 season, which I actually have a photo of. It was hard to find. However, amidst the hope for the future, the St George and Illawarra merger triggered further talks between the NRL partners. Adelaide was told by News Limited, quote, "We have concluded that further significant financial commitment by News, in addition to funds received from the NRL, is not financially viable. The Rams board had desperately sought out alternative funding and looked at merging with the Sydney club to no avail. So on December the 1st, while the players were away at training camps in Strathalbyn, the Rams closed their doors. Their promising 99 team never took the field." So that was it for the Adelaide Rams. Now, let me just sort of I've still got a little bit to go here, but I found this Kerrod Walters quote from 2018 from the Sunshine Coast Daily article. He's talking about Adelaide Oval. and he's talking about how he was disappointed that they got basically scrapped after 2 years. So, quote from Kerry Walters, "That's why I was disappointed. They didn't get an opportunity to fulfill their destiny," which I thought was a bit of a romantic quote, but a bit ridiculous. And then he goes on to say, "There's every chance Adelaide could have gone on, perhaps not had quite the success that Melbourne has had, but they certainly would have been a competitive franchise with good support." And then, in fairness, they were averaging better crowds in that first season than we were. We were only averaging 11, 12,000 that first season. And also, we have to be fair and say, you know, they finished 9th that year. We were 3rd. We were flying in 98.
And 99.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of think that if we didn't have that early success, Melbourne Storm could have easily gone down this path of mediocrity. They could have lost interest very quickly. But, you know, history tells another story. Now, the only player that I think went on to play for the Storm that was on the Adelaide books was David Kidwell, New Zealand international. He was at the Rams, 97, 98. But the biggest Melbourne Storm link that the Rams have, we obviously played them in one game in 1998. Now, we as soon as I think Storm or Rams 98, I think of the Southern States Cup. So this was this one-off gimmick trophy that was there to try to like drum up this sort of rivalry between the two clubs and draw a bit more interest, I think, in the Melbourne and Adelaide press about the game. Now, I remember when I started looking up this, I could not find anything about this on the internet. It's really this obscure thing that I think everybody's forgotten about. So I've actually had to dive into some old newspaper articles. I actually had to sign up to the State Library archives. Just to prove that I wasn't crazy, and this thing actually does exist. So there's one quote from The Age on June the 12th. Quote, "As if the rivalry needed intensifying," because apparently the Storm-Rams rivalry was this huge thing, even though they've never played each other. "The two sides will play for the Southern States Cup as well as points tomorrow night." And then the Adelaide Advertiser opened up their article on the game on June 13th. This was before the game, obviously. The opening line, "The fierce rivalry between South Australia and Victoria will tonight enter a new era when the Adelaide Rams take on the Melbourne Storm for the Southern States Cup." A new era that lasted one game. So it's always funny, like, looking back at this. You know, despite all these sort of attempts by the clubs and the media to try to pump up the South Australia versus Victoria rivalry, the attendance that night was an abysmal 8,200, which is one of the Storm's worst attendances of their history. So obviously there wasn't too much interest in the Adelaide Rams Melbourne Storm rivalry back then. So yeah, and so we went on to win the Southern States Cup. I actually tweeted at Melbourne Storm if they have a photo of the Southern States Cup. I'd love to show it with you guys, but I don't. But anyway, so that's a brief history of the Adelaide Rams. And so let's just quickly flick through some photos. So this is Chubby Checker, Dub. Now, you know a bit more about Chubby Checker than I do, don't you?
Chubby Checker is "Come On Baby, Let's Do the Twist." He was a famous singer and dancer from the 50s and 60s. So if you know that, "Come on baby, let's do the twist." I think he's still kicking. Got to be getting ancient if he is, but that's Chubby Checker, a very famous, big, happy, jaunty American singer. So you can see why they called him that, based on the way he's filling out that jumper there.
Yeah, and for some reason he sung at one of their games. So that was the Rams gimmick. This is Rams Central, or wherever their headquarters was. Graham Appo. Now, this is their sort of famous cultish yellow jersey that they only ever wore once, and it was their last ever game. It was against Newcastle. As you can imagine, they had the colour clash with the Knights. That's their 98 team. You can see David Kidwell's just got his head back
there. He is. That familiar bonce of his. Geez, that looked like a Newcastle jumper. Yeah,
exactly. Newcastle in about 2001, their jerseys looked very similar to their this Rams jersey. That's them after their first win at Adelaide Oval, in front of that 27 and odd crowd. This is another photo of them, the Rams celebrating. At least they should have gone at least with yellow numbers. You know, they should have added a bit of yellow into that jersey. This is Kerry Walters. That's David Kidwell, obviously playing for him in the Super League season. That was his 98 card, the Ram card. Favourite food, hungy. I don't know what that is, but maybe we can look it up later.
It might be one for us to check.
Yeah. That was their 98 jersey. That's the 98 away jersey that they famously wore in their last ever game. And this is that 99 jersey. So apparently this was going to be their jersey for 1999, which they obviously never competed.
Hang on, in '99, were they planning to play in the old domestic one-day cricket competition or something? Were they? That is an interesting one.
Yeah, it does. It does look a bit like that, doesn't it? And this was looking up Southern States Cup. I found this. This is quite funny. So this is from the official Storm Twitter account back in 2013. You know, we're showing off our silverware, and then classic footy. Where's the Southern States Cup? That is a great question, Dubs. We need to start a campaign. Where is the Southern States Cup? Well, I want to see a photo. What's happened to it?
Pics or it didn't happen, as the kids say.
Bring it back. Bring back the Southern States Cup.
We hold it in perpetuity at the moment. We are yet to be challenged. No one has been worthy from the Southern States.
Yep. It's our first ever piece of silverware. If that ever true, it was Melbourne Storm's first ever trophy. It wasn't the 99 Premiership. It was the Southern States Cup.
That's true.
All right. Okay.
Your ponderings, as always, are incredible.
They're getting